The morning was cold and quiet. A thick fog covered the train station in the small town of Millfield. The old platform creaked under the weight of early footsteps. Birds called from the trees, but even they seemed to sense something different in the air. A young man in a green army uniform stood beside a black and white dog. The dog was a border collie with smart eyes and a wagging tail. His name was Max. "All right, boy," the man said softly. "Time for me to go." The dog looked up at him with wide, shining eyes. His ears twitched. His tail slowed. He could tell something was happening, something important. The man, Daniel, crouched down and gave Max a tight hug. Max licked his cheek. "I'll be back soon," Daniel whispered. "Be a good boy. Stay safe." Max whined and put his paw on Daniel's arm. The train arrived with a loud whistle and a rush of steam. Daniel stood, grabbed his bag, and walked toward the train door. He stopped and looked back. Max was still watching. The train doors closed with a click. The engine pulled forward. Slowly, the train rolled away down the track, and Daniel was gone. Max sat there on the platform, ears forward, eyes on the tracks. He didn't move. Not when the train was out of sight. Not when the other people left. Not even when the station worker came over and tried to shoo him away. "He'll leave when he gets hungry," the man said, shrugging. But Max didn't leave. That night, the wind blew hard. Rain started to fall. Max curled up beside the bench where Daniel had last stood. His fur was wet, but he stayed. He was waiting. The next morning, a woman named Mrs. Carter came to the station to catch her train. She saw Max lying there, cold and shivering. "Oh, you poor thing," she said, kneeling beside him. "Where's your owner?" Max looked up at her, then turned back toward the tracks. She placed a piece of ham near him. He sniffed it, then slowly ate it, but never moved from his spot. "Strange dog," she muttered, "but sweet." Mrs. Carter told her neighbors. Word spread around town about the loyal dog at the station. People began to leave food and water near the bench. Some tried to take Max home. He always refused. Days passed, then weeks. Max still waited. Some kids from the nearby school gave him a red scarf. They tied it gently around his neck. It made him look like a little soldier. "He's waiting for someone," a boy said. "Maybe his best friend." One old man nodded. "Maybe he's waiting for someone who's never coming back." But Max didn't know that, or maybe he did. All he knew was that his person said, "I'll be back soon." So he waited. Max had become a part of Millfield. Every morning, he was there at the station. His black and white fur stood out against the dusty ground, and his red scarf flapped in the wind. The people in the town would pass by, nodding or smiling at the dog who never left. Mrs. Carter often brought him a sandwich, and Mr. Johnson, the baker, gave him bits of bread every day before opening his shop. Some of the children from the school would pet him as they ran past on their way home. They would always stop for a moment, look at his sad eyes, and give him a quick hug. The other dogs in town would bark at Max as they passed the station, but Max never moved. He just watched them, his eyes always focused on the train tracks, as if he expected someone to step off a train at any moment. "Maybe his owner is coming back," little Sarah said one day as she stroked Max's fur. "He's waiting for him." "Maybe," said her mother, "but you know, some dogs are just like that, loyal to the very end." But Sarah wasn't so sure. She thought Max was waiting for someone very special. As the weeks turned into months, the town became more curious about Max. They all wondered why he stayed. Where was his owner? The mystery made the dog even more interesting. Some of the people started visiting Max just to talk to him, to sit with him for a while, as if they could feel the dog's sadness. One evening, an older man named Mr. Edwards stopped by. He had been a soldier once, long ago, and he looked at Max with a deep understanding. "You know," Mr. Edwards said quietly, "I've seen dogs wait before. I've seen them wait for their owners who never came back. It's not easy." The people around him nodded, but no one really understood. They didn't know the whole story yet. One day, a young woman named Lena arrived in Millfield. She was a journalist, and she had heard about the dog who waited. She was curious, and she wanted to write about him. Lena had always loved animals, and something about Max's story touched her heart. She went straight to the train station to find out more. When she saw Max, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. He looked up at her with those wide, gentle eyes, but didn't move. He had been waiting for so long. Lena sat down on the bench beside him, feeling the silence between them. She took out her notebook and began to write. After a few days of asking around, Lena learned that Max had been waiting for Daniel, a young man who had left the town years ago. Daniel was a soldier who had gone to serve overseas, promising Max he would return soon. But after Daniel left, no one heard from him. The town had sent letters, but they all came back marked as undelivered. One old neighbor, Mrs. Miller, told Lena that Daniel had been a kind young man. He had always been with Max. When Daniel left, Max stood by the door, watching, waiting for him to return. Max never gave up, Mrs. Miller said, her voice trembling. He waited all through the winters, all through the summers, every day, every night. Lena wrote down everything, but she still didn't know what had happened to Daniel. Why hadn't he come back? That evening, Lena walked back to the station with Max beside her. He didn't seem to mind her company. He just sat next to her, his head resting on his paws, staring at the tracks. Lena looked down at him and smiled. I promise, Max. I'll find out what happened. I'll help you. Lena was determined to find out the truth about Daniel. The next morning, she went to the local library to look through old newspapers. She sat down with a pile of dusty books and started flipping through pages, scanning every story she could find about the town. She was looking for anything that might explain why Daniel hadn't come back. After a few hours, Lena found an article about a military mission that had taken place several years ago. The headline was small, hidden in the corner of the page. The story was about a young soldier, Private Daniel Evans, who had been listed as missing in action during a peacekeeping mission overseas. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had found him. She read through the article carefully. It said that Daniel's team had been involved in a dangerous operation in a distant country. A fight broke out, and several soldiers were injured. Daniel's unit was separated during the chaos, and when the fighting ended, Daniel was nowhere to be found. The article didn't give much more information. It was clear that the military hadn't been able to locate him, and they had eventually declared him missing. The story didn't mention Max or anyone looking for him. It was as if Daniel had just disappeared without a trace. Lena felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't imagine how hard it must have been for Daniel's family and for Max, waiting for him all this time. After the library, Lena went to the town's post office to ask about Daniel's family. The woman at the counter was older with gray hair, and she had worked in the town for many years. Daniel's mother, Alice, moved away a few months after Daniel left, the woman said. She couldn't handle it anymore. Every day, she'd go to the station and wait. But when Daniel didn't return, she just couldn't stay here. It was too painful. Lena felt a wave of sadness wash over her. Alice, Daniel's mother, had suffered just like Max. But unlike the dog, Alice had eventually given up. Where does she go? Lena asked softly. I'm not sure, the woman replied. I heard she moved to a small town to the south. She needed peace, I think. Lena thanked the woman and left the post office, her mind racing. She knew she had to find Alice. Maybe she had more answers about what had happened to Daniel and why he had never come back. The next day, Lena drove to the town where Alice was said to have moved. It wasn't far, just a couple of hours. She had her notebook and her camera ready, hoping to learn more about the soldier who had promised to return to his dog. When Lena arrived, she found a small, quiet town. The streets were lined with simple houses and the people walked slowly, as if they had all the time in the world. Lena asked around, and it didn't take long for someone to point her to a little house on the edge of town. Alice was sitting on the front porch, knitting. Her face was gentle but worn, her eyes distant. She looked up when Lena approached. Can I help you? Alice asked, her voice calm but weary. Lena took a deep breath. I'm looking for answers about your son, Daniel Evans. I'm writing a story about his dog, Max, who's been waiting for him. At the mention of Max's name, Alice's face softened. She put down her knitting and motioned for Lena to sit next to her. Max, Alice whispered. He's still there, isn't he? Lena nodded. Yes, every day. He waits at the station, just like he always has. Tears filled Alice's eyes. She wiped them away quickly, trying to stay strong. I never told anyone, Alice said quietly, but I knew Daniel wasn't coming back. I knew in my heart, but I couldn't tell Max. I couldn't break his heart the way mine was broken. Lena listened, her heart heavy. Alice continued. Max waited for Daniel every day, and I couldn't bear to see it, so I left Millfield. But I never stopped thinking about them both. Lena could see the pain in Alice's eyes. Do you think Daniel knew how much Max loved him? Alice smiled sadly. Of course he did. Max was always there for him. He was his best friend. Lena sat quietly on Alice's porch, listening to the soft sounds of the wind and the distant chirping of birds. Alice's words echoed in her mind. She had known. She had always known that Daniel would never return, but she couldn't bear to tell Max. She couldn't break the dog's heart, the same way her own heart had been shattered. After a long silence, Alice spoke again, her voice soft but steady. Max was always by Daniel's side. He was there when Daniel needed him the most, and Daniel was there for Max. They were a team, and I knew it would destroy him if I told him the truth. So I just left. But I didn't want to leave Max behind. I knew he wouldn't ever stop waiting. Lena took a deep breath. Alice, you don't have to feel guilty. Max waited because he loved Daniel. And even though Daniel isn't here, he hasn't forgotten that love. Alice nodded, wiping away another tear. I know, but I couldn't stay and watch him wait forever. I had to go to find some peace. But it never felt right, not knowing if Max was okay, if anyone was taking care of him. Lena reached out and gently placed her hand on Alice's. Max is fine. He's been taken care of by the town. They've all been looking after him. He's not alone. Alice gave a small, grateful smile. I'm glad to hear that. I always worried about him. Lena knew there was more to the story. She had learned about the mission that Daniel had been on, the one where he was declared missing. But she needed to know more. She needed the full story, the story that would finally explain why Daniel never came home. The next morning, Lena visited the local cemetery in Millfield. She had heard that a memorial for Daniel was placed there, along with the names of other soldiers who had died in the same conflict. The cemetery was small but peaceful, and it was a place where the people of the town came to remember those they had lost. Lena walked slowly through the rows of headstones, her footsteps soft on the gravel path. As she reached the end of the cemetery, she found the memorial, a simple stone with the names of soldiers carved into it. At the very top was Daniel Evans. Lena placed her hand on the cold stone, feeling a deep sadness. She had hoped to find something, anything, that would explain why Daniel hadn't returned. But all she saw were the words, gone but not forgotten. She closed her eyes and stood there for a long time, remembering the love between Max and Daniel, and the loyalty that had kept the dog waiting. As she turned to leave, Lena's phone buzzed. It was a message from a man named Jack, who had been a close friend of Daniel's. He had heard about her search and wanted to talk. Lena called him back immediately, her heart racing. Jack's voice was rough but kind. Daniel and I served together, Jack said. I was there with him that day. We got separated during the fight, and I barely made it out. I don't know what happened to him after that. I've always felt guilty about not being able to find him, to bring him home. Lena could hear the pain in his voice. Jack, do you know what happened to him? Did he ever talk about Max? Jack paused for a moment before answering. Yeah, he talked about Max a lot. Daniel loved that dog more than anything. He used to say that Max was the one thing that kept him going. When things got tough, Max was always there, always loyal. Lena's voice trembled as she spoke. But he never came back. Why? Why didn't he come home? Jack sighed. We think he was caught in an explosion. He was badly injured, but we didn't find him. His body. We couldn't recover it. I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have brought him home. Lena felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had finally found the truth, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. Daniel had died, far away from home, never getting the chance to return to Max. Thank you for telling me, Jack, Lena said softly. I'll make sure Max knows. He deserves to know the truth. Lena stood by the train station, her heart heavy with the truth she had learned. Max sat beside her, as always, his eyes fixed on the distant tracks. He was waiting for someone, waiting for Daniel. Lena had spoken to Jack and learned about the accident, about Daniel's death far away. She had heard everything she needed to know, but there was still one thing left, telling Max. She knelt beside him, her hand resting on his fur. The dog looked up at her, his eyes filled with that same quiet hope, as if he knew something was about to change. Max, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know you've been waiting for Daniel, and I know how much you loved him. But Max, Daniel is never coming back. Max's ears flicked, and for a moment he didn't move. He simply stared at Lena, as if trying to understand the words. Lena swallowed hard, her emotions overwhelming her. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel passed away a long time ago. He was a hero, Max. He loved you, and he always wanted to come home to you. But sometimes things don't go as we hope. He would have wanted you to know that you were the most important part of his life. Max didn't react. He just sat there, his eyes still fixed on the tracks, as if waiting for something, anything, to happen. Lena could see the confusion in his face. He didn't understand yet, but Lena knew she had to say the words. He's gone, Max, she repeated, her voice stronger now. But you've done everything right. You were loyal to him, and he loved you more than anything. The wind blew softly around them, and for a long moment, there was only silence. The trains passed by, but Max didn't look at them. He didn't even move. Lena gently ran her fingers through his fur, her heart breaking for the dog who had waited so long. She knew it was hard for him to understand, just as it had been hard for Alice, for the people in town, and for herself. But then something happened. Max slowly stood up. He stretched, his body stiff from sitting still for so long. He turned his head and looked at Lena, his eyes soft but tired. Then he slowly walked away from the station. Not far, just a few steps, but it was a change. Lena stood up, watching him. She didn't say anything, not at first. She wanted to give him space. She wanted him to make this decision on his own. Max walked to the edge of the platform, his head held a little higher than before. He sniffed the air, then looked back at Lena one more time. There was something different in his eyes, something that hadn't been there before. It was as if he had heard what she said, as if he had understood. For the first time in years, Max didn't look toward the tracks. He didn't stare at the empty train station, waiting for Daniel to return. Instead, he turned and walked slowly down the path that led out of the station. Lena followed him, a few steps behind. She didn't rush. She just walked beside him, letting him lead the way. They reached the little park near the station, where the town children played. Max walked over to a bench and sat down, looking up at the sky. It was as if he had found a new place to rest, a place where he could finally let go of the past. Lena sat next to him, her hand gently resting on his back. It's okay now, Max, she said softly. You don't have to wait anymore. Max looked at her and then back at the sky. His body relaxed for the first time in years. He wasn't waiting anymore. He had let go of the hope that had kept him rooted to the station, and in doing so, he had found peace. Lena smiled through her tears. She had helped Max find the closure he needed, just as she had helped Alice. And now, Max could finally live the rest of his life without waiting for someone who would never return. It was time for both of them to move forward. Max's days at the station slowly became a memory in Millfield. The townspeople still talked about him, but they no longer saw the dog waiting by the tracks, staring at the horizon. Instead, they saw a different Max, one who was no longer looking back, but moving forward. Lena continued to visit Max every day. She'd bring him his favorite treats, and they'd walk around the park together. Max had become a regular in the town again, but now he had a new energy. He wasn't the sad, waiting dog anymore. He was playful, curious, and free. The children who had once stopped to pet him still ran past, but now they noticed the change in him. He no longer just sat by the bench. Instead, he joined them as they played. He'd chase after a ball or roll on the grass, his tail wagging joyfully. One afternoon, as Lena sat with Max in the park, she saw Mrs. Carter, the woman who had always brought in sandwiches, sitting on a nearby bench. Mrs. Carter waved at her and smiled. "Max looks so much happier now," Mrs. Carter said. "He's finally moving on, isn't he?" Lena smiled, her heart full. "Yes, he is. It took time, but he's doing better now." "I'm glad," Mrs. Carter said, her voice soft. "You know, I used to bring him food, hoping he'd find peace. I didn't think he'd ever leave that station. It's good to see him alive again." Max trotted over to Mrs. Carter and sat down beside her, looking up at her with those familiar, soulful eyes. She petted him gently, and Max leaned into her touch. It was as if he had always known he was loved by everyone in the town, not just by Daniel. Lena watched this quietly, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. It was like the whole town had become Max's family. They had all cared for him in their own ways, and now they were watching him heal. As the weeks went by, Lena learned more about Max's impact on the people around him. One day, Mr. Johnson, the baker, stopped her while she was walking with Max. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "I've been baking for years, but I've never had a real reason to feel proud of my work. But now, seeing Max like this, I feel like my bread means something more." Lena was surprised. "How do you mean?" "Well," Mr. Johnson said with a smile, "Max has always been here, waiting. He's a symbol of something, of loyalty, of love. I think my bread, the little things I do for people in this town, matter because of him. He's taught us all what it means to be kind." Lena's eyes welled up with tears. Max had brought the whole town closer together. His simple act of waiting had touched everyone's heart, and now the whole community was sharing in his healing. One afternoon, Lena received a letter from Alice, Daniel's mother. Alice had heard about Max's change and wrote to Lena with a message of thanks. "I'm glad Max is finally free of the weight," the letter read. "I've always known he was a special dog, and I'm glad to hear he's finding peace. I've learned to live with the past, but I know it was harder for him than it ever was for me. Please tell him I'm grateful for his love, and that he'll always have a place in my heart." Lena read the letter to Max, sitting on the porch as the sun set. The dog listened quietly, as if he understood. When she finished, Max looked up at her with a calm, contented expression. He had finally found peace. As the seasons changed, Max's life became full of new experiences. He'd take long walks around the park with Lena, sometimes meeting other dogs, sometimes just sitting in the sun. He had learned to be happy again, not in spite of what had happened, but because of it. Max was no longer a dog waiting for someone to return. He was a dog who had loved deeply, who had waited loyally, and who had found his place in the world once more. He had a family in the town, a family who loved him and would always be there for him. And in his heart, Max knew that Daniel had never really left him. Daniel's love had stayed with him all along. It had never been lost, and now it was part of everything he did. Max had moved forward, but he had done it with love, loyalty, and the support of a community that had learned to cherish the simple things, the things that truly mattered. Years passed and Max grew older. His coat, once shiny and black, was now speckled with gray. His steps were slower, his energy not what it used to be. But his heart, that same loyal heart, remained as strong as ever. The people of Millfield continued to care for him, always looking out for him. He had become a beloved figure in the town, his presence a comforting reminder of the lessons he had taught everyone about love, loyalty, and the power of waiting. Lena was with him every day, and they still walked through the park, although their walks were shorter now. Max would lie down in the sun, watching the children play. As Lena sat beside him, she had become a part of the town too, and her bond with Max had grown deeper with each passing year. One warm afternoon, Lena sat by Max's side, feeling the softness of his fur as he rested his head on her lap. He had been quieter than usual that day, and Lena could tell he was tired. "Are you okay, old friend?" she whispered, gently petting him. Max opened his eyes slowly, looking up at her with the same deep, soulful gaze that had captivated her years ago. She smiled at him, her heart full of gratitude for everything he had given her and the town. "Don't worry," Lena said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "You've given us everything. You've done more than anyone could ever ask." Max let out a small sigh and closed his eyes again. He had lived a full life, one filled with love, but his time was coming to an end. The following week, Max's condition worsened. He wasn't eating as much, and he had trouble getting up from his bed. Lena knew it was time. She called the vet, who told her that Max was ready to pass peacefully, surrounded by the people who loved him. It was a hard decision, but Lena knew it was the right one. She had seen the way Max had changed over the years, how he had found peace, how he had touched so many lives. He had given everything he had to the town, and now it was time for him to rest. On the day Max passed, the sun was shining brightly, just as it had always done during their walks. Lena sat beside him, holding his paw, her tears falling softly onto his fur. He looked up at her one last time, his eyes full of love and understanding. Then, with a final breath, Max was gone. The entire town mourned his loss. People gathered at the park where he had spent so many happy hours, sharing stories of Max's loyalty and the way he had brought them all together. They remembered how he had waited for Daniel, how he had taught them all about the strength of love, and how he had shown them the importance of never giving up on those we care about. Lena placed a small plaque in the park, near the bench where she had spent so many hours with Max. It read, "In memory of Max, a dog who taught us all the meaning of love, loyalty, and patience. You will always have a place in our hearts." The plaque became a place of remembrance for everyone who had known Max. Visitors would stop by, read the inscription, and take a moment to reflect on the lessons he had left behind. Some even brought flowers and left them by the bench, just as they had done for the soldier Daniel. As the years passed, Max's story became a legend in Millfield. It was told to children who had never met him, so they would know the dog who had waited for his owner, the dog who had loved without question, and the dog who had never given up. His story was a reminder to all of the power of love and loyalty and how it could bring a community together. Lena moved on with her life, but she always remembered the dog who had changed everything. She would sometimes visit the park, sitting on the bench where Max had rested, remembering his gentle spirit and the lessons he had taught her. Max may have left this world, but his legacy lived on in every person whose life he had touched. His memory remained alive in the hearts of those who knew him and in the spirit of Millfield itself, a town forever changed by a dog who had waited. And in the quiet moments, when the wind blew softly through the trees and the children played in the park, it almost felt like Max was still there, watching over them as he always had. Years had passed since Max had left, but his presence was still felt in the town of Millfield. His story lived on, carried in the hearts of the people who had known him. His love, loyalty, and the lesson of his long wait had become a part of the town's soul, something that everyone would remember forever. One crisp autumn day, Lena was walking through the town square, just as she did when she first arrived in Millfield. She'd come to love the town, and it had become home to her. The children still played in the park, and the bakery still smelled of fresh bread. But it was the quiet moments, the moments when the world seemed to stop, that reminded Lena of Max. As she walked by the park, Lena saw a small group of children sitting near the bench where Max's plaque was placed. They were talking softly, looking up at the words etched in the stone. Lena stopped and listened for a moment, drawn by their conversation. "Who was Max?" one child asked. "He was a dog," another replied. "But he was more than just a dog. He was special. He waited for his owner for so long. People say he taught everyone about love and loyalty." The first child nodded. He never gave up. He loved his owner so much. Lena felt a smile tug at her lips. She had heard the story being told many times, but hearing it from the children was different. It was like Max's legacy was living on, passed from one generation to the next. A mother who had been sitting nearby noticed Lena and walked over. She smiled warmly at her. "Lena, how are you today?" "I'm good," Lena said, returning the smile. "It's nice to see the kids remembering Max. His story lives on in them." The mother nodded. "It's beautiful, isn't it? How he touched all of us. I've been telling my kids about Max, and they always ask me questions. They're amazed by how much love one dog could have." Lena's heart warmed at the thought. Max had become a symbol of something greater than himself. His waiting, his loyalty, had left an indelible mark on everyone who had heard his story. It wasn't just about the dog, it was about what he had come to represent: love, patience, and the strength of devotion. As she continued walking, Lena stopped by the local cafe. She had become friends with many of the town's residents, and today she was meeting Alice. The two women had stayed in touch, their bond growing stronger with time. Alice had returned to Millfield a few years ago, and she had found peace in the town. She had even begun volunteering at the animal shelter, working with dogs who were looking for new homes. Lena found Alice sitting at a corner table, a cup of tea in front of her. Alice looked up and smiled when she saw Lena. "Hello, Lena," she said softly. "I've been thinking about Max a lot lately." Lena sat down across from her. "I think about him every day, too. He was a special dog." Alice nodded. "He was. And he brought so much good to all of us. I didn't realize, when I left, just how much he meant to the people here. He gave us all something to believe in." Lena smiled. "Yes, he did. I think that's what I'll always remember, how he changed us all, just by being himself. He taught us about waiting, about loving without question, and about never losing hope." They sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on everything Max had taught them. The town had been forever changed by him, and now Max's memory was woven into the fabric of Millfield. He had brought people together, helped them understand what it meant to truly care for one another. "I'm glad Max is still remembered," Alice said quietly. "It's like his spirit is still here with us." Lena nodded. "He'll always be here. In every story, in every memory, and in the way we care for each other." As the sun began to set, casting a soft golden light across the town square, Lena felt a sense of peace. Max's story had come full circle. His loyalty had been a gift that no one could forget. And now he was more than just a dog who had waited. He was a part of Millfield's heart, and his love and devotion would live on forever.